Hey, thank you so much for having the opportunity to be here with you this morning. I appreciate the connection with Jim and the long history, actually, of Jim supporting Angels Place and Nathan, very organized individual. Mom and Dad, you need to hear that. Was extremely helpful to put this together. And so I appreciate that. I bring you greetings this morning from Holiday Park. Many of you know folks over at Holiday Park. I am going to ask you to think about and remember one specific individual at Holiday Park. Many of you know Earl, right? Earl Jack. It's not going very well. Earl is with his family down in Tennessee, and he's had a series of kind of mini strokes that he has struggled with over the last few years. And those of you that know him, like I know him, and many of you know him, he's a man of faith. A man of great courage. He's done a lot of amazing things, so I just ask you to keep him in your prayers. He's in his mid-80s and is struggling a bit. And I also bring you greetings this morning from a congregation that is exactly the opposite side of the world from where you are right now. In fact, about 9.5 hours ago, they had worship this morning. And I did hear from them this morning, and I think they had close to 200 people in attendance at their worship this morning. 170 of them are children. And I want to tell you a little bit about that, and I want to begin here. You might wonder, that's kind of an odd scripture to have read at the beginning of a talk about Angels Place. But I want to ask you an important question. Do you believe in the God of the loaves and the fishes? We just heard the story about how Jesus took just a few loaves and a couple fish, and he fed 5,000 plus people. Do you believe in that God? Let me ask you again. Do you believe in that God? Yes. Well, so do I. And what I'm going to share with you today is just as miraculous as that miracle that Jesus performed so long ago. And I've seen it with my own eyes, and that's what I want to share with you about this miracle. So it wasn't too long ago, about 20 years ago, God heard a request from a very remote place in India. This happens to be the spot where Angels Place exists. And there was a cry. There was a cry from children. There was a cry from the community for help and for specific needs. And those of you that know the history of Angels Place know that a little over 20 years ago, Jan Swinson, who's a member at Holiday Park, many of you know he's spoken here before, was traveling in that area. He was actually speaking with the missionaries in that area. I met some folks this morning that helped sponsor, and I think you guys may do as well, the missionaries in India. And Jan was actually speaking in that area, and he found the number of children on the streets was remarkable, and he asked about that. You know, there are more children that live on the streets in India than there are people who live in California. There are more children who live in the streets in India than there are people who live in the country of Poland. And so Jan came back and said, we got to do something about this. And it was about 20 years ago. 10 of us met in his home, and then we started to invite other people in that. And we realized that the only help that could be there available had to come from God. And so there were voices so long ago that were asking for help, and God provided it. In fact, those of you that know anything about the James connection, it comes from James 1:27. James 1:27 says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress. And that's exactly what this ministry has been all about for 20 years. Now let me just tell you a little bit about it. Some of you know a lot about it, but let me give you a little background. Angels Place is located in a very remote area up in, India looks like your hand, and it's kind of over here on your thumb. And actually, it's very close to the border in a community called Manipur. And specifically, Angels Place is in a very small village called Charachanpur, which is just a little south of the community of of infall in Manipur. Now, as Jim mentioned, I'm going to tell you more about what's going on in Manipur right now because, frankly, it's pretty scary. And we'll tell you more about that as we go on. But let me tell you just a little bit about this ministry. Now, those of you that have traveled to India, and I know a couple of you have, and some of you have family that have been there, you know it's a very different place than here. Very different place. These pictures are from my first trip to India. I've taken 5 trips to see Angel's Place so far. The last one, by the way, was in October of last year. So the information I'm sharing with you is pretty recent. And the photos are all pretty recent as well, except this group, because I thought it really represented India in a very unique way. A lot of the things that we take for granted here are just not in place there. Primarily infrastructure, you know, things like nice roads, things like nice internet and connections to each other. It's not the same in this part of India. Now, frankly, there are other places in India that are far advanced to where we are in terms of their technology and ideas and perspectives. But this is in a very remote, kind of very mountainous area. It looks a lot like West Virginia, actually. And that's my home, so I remember and love being there. And, you know, this, oops, went right by that slide. This, there it is the land that became Angel's Place before it was Angel's Place. But let me tell you what Angel's Place does. We've built buildings there to house the children. We started with about 40. We now have 170 children there. 170 kids that are taken care of off the streets. We have a waiting list of over 1,000 to be added to this process. In fact, our goal was to have 140. They keep pushing us and pushing us and pushing us to add more and add more and add more, which is great. Whatever we can do to help with that. But Angel's Place is kind of organized around providing shelter and safety first, because these kids were on the streets. Providing them food. A lot of the kids were eating grass and things like that. In fact, when we bring a new child in, it usually takes about 2 to 3 months to be able to get them to acquainted with the diet that we provide them, because they're not used to eating meat, frankly, or even rice to that effect. The kids eat twice a day. People always ask me that. They eat in the morning and then they eat after school. We provide them life skills and vocational training, so they are learning all kinds of things. I'll tell you more about vocational training in just a little bit. We provide them Christian instruction. As I say, they met this morning, had a worship service. They'll have another one this afternoon. They have a worship service every evening. They have devotional times and devotional activities, and some of the we would call them counselors. They call them wardens, which is kind of an odd name, in our world, but they call them wardens, are responsible for that and are Christian people doing that. We provide them clothing. Healthcare, of course, is an important thing. We saw them through COVID. We had to send them home during COVID because the government would not allow us to keep them there during COVID. We brought them back. All of the children survived and flourished during that time. We had 16 kids that ended up with COVID on our site, which we isolated and managed, and every child has healthy. It's important to realize, though, that the first child that was ever selected to come to Angel's Place died before they got there. And you see, malnutrition is one thing. AIDS is something else that these folks deal with. Not too far from where Angel's Place is are the opium fields. And so a lot of the parents are either drug addicts or deceased because of that, and that's why a lot of these children have historically been on the streets. And we provide them education. We have a wonderful partnership with a Christian school not too far away that we pay tuition so that our children can go there. It's important for you to realize we pay tuition so the kids can go there, and all of the rest of the community can have education as well. They don't all pay tuition. We pay tuition. They can educate our kids as well as the whole community because of that. Just some faces. If you ever have an opportunity to be there, this is I just had a new grandchild, so I was about to say it's my favorite place on earth, but right now my favorite place on earth is in Delaware, where this new grandchild is. But this is one of my very, very favorite places on earth because it is alive. It is joyous. It is fun to be there. You can't imagine 170 kids running around, enjoying. The singing is phenomenal. It's loud, very loud, and it is joyous. These kids, I have the opportunity to lead them in singing, teach them new VBS songs and things like that, and they just love it. It's remarkable. Here's some other pictures that I wanted to show you. The big building that you see is the boys' dormitory. It used to be where everybody lived, but we've outgrown that. And so now the boys live there, and the pictures you see painted there are murals that the children have painted on the walls. You'll see the kids up washing clothes every morning. I should tell you that the children get up at 5:10 every morning. The first thing that they do is study. And they study for an hour or so. And we have tutors that come in at 6 o'clock to help the kids because, unfortunately, only about 60% of the kids in this community graduate. Ours is about 85% right now. We've done really well with that. We bring tutors in every morning to help the kids, but it's a different kind of study than what you're used to. I mean, you're used to kids being alone and thinking and working. These kids all do it in the same room, and they all recite their lessons every day. So it sounds like a beehive in there because you hear all these voices and all of these activities. And then the children wash their clothes and take care of those activities. You can kind of see right there in that a little bit of what they call it the swimming pool. Please, no one swims in it. But it has baptized hundreds. We have over 450 children that have been at Angel's Place. Not all of them stayed with us the entire time. Most of them have, thankfully. And most of them have obeyed the gospel because of the message, because of the love that they've seen there. It is remarkable. I'm going to tell you that I grew up in Morgantown, not too far away, and I have been involved in every possible ministry you could ever imagine. I was in the bus ministry. I was in the teen ministry. I went to the campus ministry at WVU. In fact, I was even the campus minister at WVU at one point in time. At Holiday Park, I've been the deacon of worship and the deacon of education and the deacon of benevolence, and I've never seen anything that equates to this ministry. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. Here's a couple other pictures. This picture of the building is where the women are. Girls stay on the first 2 floors there. The far end of the bottom floor is also where the food is, the preparation of the food. We have a full-time, I wouldn't even call him a chef, a cook, and his family live on site there as well to take care of the kids. Like you can imagine, feeding 170 every day is a lot. The top floor of this, which is called Lydia's Place, the top floor holds about 500 people in a worship type service like this. That's where they had worship service this morning. And I have been there when there have been over 400 to 450 people there in that auditorium celebrating God with these children. They invite the community in a lot to be able to celebrate with them. This little part of the building here, I'm afraid to push any button. There we go. This part of the building here is really a new part that we've built that's all about vocational education. We realize that not all of our children are going to finish high school. Again, when you start 4 or 5 years behind, it's hard to catch up. And you're also 5 years older than everybody in your grade. It's tough. So we also started a whole series of vocational education, which I'll tell you just a little bit more about. You see the pictures of the kids here. Anytime there's pictures, anytime you got a camera, you're going to get a group. They love the ham for the pictures. This little girl right here is one of the ones my family sponsors. This is a picture inside of the girls' dorm. They actually choose to sleep 2 to a bed often, and it's kind of a support, and we have plenty of room for them if they choose, but this is how the girls choose to do that. The boys do not. Here's a picture of some of the boys' environments as well. I love this picture I caught last time I was there of this little guy working on his homework and one of the older children helping him. Can you see that there? It's just wonderful. They are expected to keep their rooms clean. I'm going to say that again for the parents in the room. They are expected to keep their rooms clean, and they are managed. They also keep the community quite beautiful. India is not a pretty place in a lot of. It's got beautiful, you know, landscape and things like that, but it's a very, very dirty and dusty place. But they keep it very, very, very clean. I want to introduce you to just a few people here very quickly. Those of you that, again, would recognize Jan, who's right here, Jan Swinson, who's been the executive director and kind of beginning this process, traveled with us, with me last time to India in October, just of last year. Is an amazing man, a lawyer here in Pittsburgh, that now this is kind of his full-time work. Ironically, here's one of the other little guys that my family supports. This gentleman right here I'm going to tell you about, his name is Sangha. Sangha is a very unique guy. He was actually Jan's interpreter when he was speaking. Remember I said he was over there, Jan was speaking with the missionaries. He was actually teaching about the Holy Lands because Jan has traveled there a lot, knows a lot about it, has a lot of pictures, so he was going around the country teaching about the Holy Lands, and he met Sangha as his interpreter because these children do not speak English. Well, that's not true. The children do speak English. They're educated in English, but that's not their native tongue. Their native tongue is Payete and Hindi and 13 other languages. Okay, so it is remarkable that these little kids that are 4 years old speak 4 and 5 languages, and I can barely speak English, right? I'm from West Virginia, so I speak it a kind of a weird way, right? You weren't supposed to laugh at that. Come on. No, but Sangha was a great blessing for us because Sangha, by profession, is a banker. And I'm just going to start to share with you how, remember the loaves and the fishes? How God has used this, miracles have just occurred. You know how hard it is to send money to India? I'm just going to tell you it's impossible. When we first started the Angel's Place, one of my daughters, thought, oh, it would be a wonderful idea. We're going to collect teddy bears and Barbie dolls and we're going to send them to the kids. Kids never got them. Because India is it's a rough place as it relates to people steal things. Anything comes in the mail, it doesn't get there. We don't even send things to them anymore. We tried. It gets stolen before we get there. But guess what? God provided us a banker. Someone who could, at a moment's notice, connect directly to us through e-commerce. Amazing that happened. This gentleman here is Sangha's best friend from elementary school. Just retired right when we started Angel's Place, and has been I would call him the father of Angel's Place the entire time. His name is Englion. An amazing, amazing man who has a relationship with these children as a father would his child. He disciplines them. He waits for them every day at 3 o'clock when they come home from school, and he checks in with every child, 170 children on the way home. He is an amazing man. I've seen him challenge the children. I've seen him discipline the children. We are so blessed that God sent us, Englion, to be part of that. There are two other kind of main leaders at Angel's Place, fairly new actually. Sangha's second son is Siam. Siam has a master's degree, was educated, and has come back and now lives full-time at Angel's Place. And he runs two things. He runs Angel's Place from an operations perspective, and he also runs the lemongrass fields and the activity associated with that, which is one of the ministries that they began to try to help fund Angel's Place. Siam is an amazing young man, remarkable young man. He just took a wife, has a child, took a wife about 3 years ago now, has a 1-year-old child, remarkable family. They all live at Angel's Place. It's fun to watch all of the children raise this little baby. It's great. Sangi is the woman here who is someone else that recently came to us about 4 years ago. And what she does is she has a master's degree in social work, and she manages our vocational activities. She helps the children learn not only school stuff, and she does a lot of kind of personal counseling with the kids, but she also helps them with managing all of the vocational educational activities that we do. Here's a picture of the entire staff. Last time Jan and I were there, we went out. They took us out to dinner. which is always an experience in India, I got to tell you, always an experience. But it was a great thing. Just very quickly, I got to share with you a couple things about these stories here. Here's Sangha, of course, Jan, Siam, myself. There's Sangi. These two women here are two of the wardens. Again, they call the counselors wardens. This girl grew up at Angel's Place. This is Sangha. This gentleman is a warden. He also grew up at Angel's Place and now has come back to work at Angel's Place. These two individuals they call the supervisors. They're kind of in charge, right, of the counselors, of the wardens. This is Mopi, who is one of our nurses. Both of these girls have women have nursing training. And this gentleman back here is not only a graduate of Angel's Place, he also is a graduate of the Infall School of Preaching, and he has come back and now is serving at Angel's Place. He does all of the devotional kinds of activities there. Remarkable group of people. This, Les Jan and I, is the entire group of people that manage 170 children. Can you imagine? 170 children with just that few staff. And these kids, they snap to it. Everything is done very, very well there. We also, as I mentioned earlier, have hired some tutors because the kids, sometimes it's hard. School is very different. The entire grade sits in one room all day and they recite things. It's a very different educational model. Not a single computer in the school. Not a single computer in their school. I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. So we have these folks that come in. We also have folks that come in and teach vocational education. This woman teaches, that's Sangi. This woman teaches all of the children to sew, those that are interested. These two gentlemen we've hired to teach the kids computers. We have brought in a bunch of computers. We now have internet. Usually, we don't right now, and I'll tell you that in just a moment. But we have internet for the kids, and we have training for the kids. And so what they do is they go to school, they learn the traditional training, and they come home at night, and they have time on the computer. Controlled time, of course, but they have access. We realize that if we're going to educate these children, and they're going to find a job, and they don't have computer skills, that's going to be a problem. So a couple years ago, we started that process. It's gone extremely well. This is the medical facility. The gentleman there is one of the two physicians that comes out. He comes every Saturday, takes care of the children. You can see that it's a pretty modest medical area, and one of the things we want to do very soon is to advance and build a better medical facility. The children managed their way through the vaccines for COVID and all of that, which was quite a challenge. Ironically, this young man right here, Belak, is Sangha's third son, who is what we would call a PA, a physician's assistant, who comes and supports. Sangha's daughter is a dentist. Do you see how God just kind of pulls things together? It's remarkable. Okay, quick commercial break. One of the stories that I love to tell is that when Jan and Leslie and others went to go buy the land, they made the bid. The guy said, "You're Americans? No, double it." And Jan said, "No, we're not going to do that," and walked away. And in fact, we're on the way to the airport to come home. They got a call that somebody needed to sell property. Sold us property that was bigger, in a better location, and actually gave a donation to us, so it was much, much cheaper. God just moves. God just moves. Every time we go, that we go and visit him, and this is what he served me. On the left, okay, that's fruit. My left. Yeah, left is fruit. That other, those are worms, okay? And so I ate one, kind of, because that was respectful, and smiled like I did. But that's part of their diet as well. School is great for these kids. As I said, we sponsor the kids at the Herman School. These are the kids studying together. They do have their uniforms, little badges to keep them safe. You can see that they post their grades for everyone to see. So that's a motivational activity as well, part of their culture. And as I say, these are kids doing a little study. Every day they have chores that they're supposed to do, peeling potatoes in this case, or taking care of the shoes. It's interesting, the children do not wear shoes inside. That's a cultural thing for them. So all the shoes come off when you walk into the building. And of course, the kids love to play. Lots and lots and lots of activity for them. They not only enjoy what we would expect, like a playground, we put some materials there for them to play with, but soccer, football they would call it, is remarkable. These kids have skills you would not believe. In fact, one of our children who has graduated is now in line to be a professional soccer player, in training to be a professional soccer player. Quite remarkable. Now, of course, all the kids want to be professional soccer players. Most of them are not going to be professional soccer players, but it is absolutely remarkable. The picture in the bottom there, at least twice a week, they entertain each other. They will get together and do some crazy fun things. When I go, for those of you that have been to church camp know that I used to do magic, at church camp, which I'm doing again this year. They talked me back into it. I don't know how. But I do magic for the kids. They always enjoy that. And we do a lot of singing and a lot of activities with them. Again, just more activities. Vocational, we talked about sewing. Every dress in this picture is made by these kids. Every dress, every activity is made by this. The woman here is the tutor, who's a professional. They call it tailoring, but all of these dresses are made by the girls that are wearing them. And they, frankly, I attended a wedding when I was there. They made all of the dresses for the wedding. These kids have a real talent and a real ability. We buy them sewing machines, and we have some tailoring machines there as well. As I mentioned, the computer activity, just very quickly, there's a lot of things that go on here that are very, very important because it's a skill they need to know. And I don't know if you have children and you've given them a computer, that's all you have to do. They figure it out. But we have also provide them a series of instruction and helping them do that. We have a bakery area. So we bought a bunch of bakery equipment so the children can also learn to bake. Do you see what we're doing? We're trying to find a way that they can be self-sufficient. School is one thing, but many of them will not go too much further than school. In school, in India, you have to take a test to get out of grade 10. If you don't pass the test, you don't go on to grade 11. You don't pass the test in grade 12, you don't graduate. And they're national state tests. And as I said, unfortunately in this area, only about 60% of the kids fail. I got news this morning that every one of our 12th graders passed and only one of the 10th graders failed, but that was because he was ill and couldn't take the exam, so he'll have a chance to make that up. That is so different. When we started this, none of our kids were passing. So things are working. But we're also teaching them to bake. You know, if you are part of there we go. If you are part of Angel's Place, you know that twice a year we ask them to write a letter to the kids. This is the highlight of our visits when we go. The kids love to see and to read the letters and to share their experience with you because they write back, but also to have you share experience, pictures, coloring, stickers, all kinds of things like that. You might notice we do not accept gifts to the children. Because you can't give one child something and not give every child something. But this is something we can give to every child. Really, really powerful activity. I need to tell you about our last visit. This is the miracle of Angel's Place. All of these people are adults. All of these people have employment. All of these people were children at Angel's Place. In fact, you know how we number the kids, right? So they have a number, each kid. That's number one. First young woman, she's now married to a chef. She has 2 children. He works at local hospitals. She's a teacher. He's a pharmaceutical rep. This young woman actually was my first, number 12, that we sponsored. She brought back her 2 children. She made all those dresses because that's how she makes her money, is through that. This young man actually works at Angel's Place at this point. He's a history teacher sitting there with Jan. and she also works at Angel's Place. We saw child after child after child that came back when they heard we were going to be there to show the impact. See, that's the loaves and the fishes in my mind. There are so many stories that I could tell you about each of these children, about what they're doing, how they're doing it, what kinds of things are going on there. It is just absolutely remarkable. But one of the stories I need to tell you this morning is that in May, things got a lot more difficult. Without going into a lot of detail, but if you follow anything in India, India's kind of goofy right now. And to simplify this, there are the people that live in this area of India, mostly tribal. Again, remember over here, right? This area is kind of a tribal community. And when India became a nation, in their constitution, they got certain rights because they're very different than the rest of India. The rest of India is mainly Hindu, and this has Hindus, it has Christians, and it also has Muslims, and it has a few Buddhists. And they had rights given specifically to them. And they're often called the hill people because they live in the mountains, okay? And the land was given to them and told no one can come on your land. Well, in May, the valley people decided that if they became a tribal group, they would get some of those same rights, and there started a bit of a protests and then issues and anger. The valley people, which live in Imphal and that area, are mainly Hindu. As I said, the folks that live in the hill districts are not. And so the hill district protested, and the valley people started burning. And they burnt churches, they burned homes, they burned schools, they burned hospitals. Anything that was connected, particularly with Christianity, was destroyed. Remember I showed you Sangha? Sangha lived in Imphal, a couple hours away from Charachanpur, where he ran the Imphal School of Preaching. So he had 7 or 8 students, preaching students, young men. He had 2 instructors and their family. He had his family of 10 and their church in one complex, burnt down in an afternoon. In fact, Sangha is still a refugee. Sangha lives currently in a state outside of Manipur because everything he had, he lost. Everything he had, he lost. He just bought a car. They burned it. The church was burnt. On top of the church was built his home. His home was destroyed. The Imphal School of Preaching now, unfortunately, no longer exists. It was burned to the ground in an afternoon. And unfortunately, since May, there has continued to be unrest in this area. Charachanpur, where the kids are, thankfully, there is still unrest, but thankfully, by God's grace, they are safe. Remember how I said that we were trying to buy one piece of property and we weren't allowed to because the guy tried to, cheat us because we were Americans? Remember that? Well, that group, that location is right downtown. That's where all the protests have been. That's where all the violence has been. Where our children live is maybe a half mile outside of the city. And it has been protected, and it has been isolated, and praise God, we don't let the kids off the campus, but the schools have stopped. There's no internet. In fact, I just got a request this morning from Sangha. We got to have some kind of connection, so we're going to try to figure out a satellite connection, those kinds of things. So this is the home that was burnt, and you can see the bottom there is the church. The top was their home. That second picture there is the Imphal School of Preaching and their staff. It was beautiful, and they had done some really wonderful things. But it has been very difficult. Those of us that live here don't really understand persecution. Yeah, I know people sometimes You could argue it's hard to be a Christian today because it's maybe the only group that's allowed to be persecuted in the United States to some extent. But it's not like this. And I got to tell you, I have stood in this place. I have worshiped in that church. I have been to a wedding on that site. I have slept in that home. It's gone. And the people that run that have been chased away. Now, thankfully, as I say, we have a good staff and strong staff at Angel's Place. Everyone has been protected there. We don't know what the future holds and how it's going to happen in India, but we do know one thing. Our God is faithful. This is the God of the loaves and the fishes. This is the God that took an empty field in India and saved 450 children. And he did it by using people on the opposite side of the world. When you walked in the door there, and I appreciate this very much, when you walked in the door, there's a picture of the children that this congregation, some of you individually, some of it as a congregation, sponsor. I got to tell you, brothers and sisters, you're saving their lives in ways that you just cannot imagine. Now, practically, right now, we need more sponsors than we ever have because the costs are going up. Because of all this stuff. You know, we have, since the very beginning, sponsorship has been $35. Today, the sponsorship is $35. We may have to change that. Got a lot to think about and pray about there because we end up several tens of $1,000s a year behind. But God handles that. God manages that for us. We also now have this very strange and unusual need that we now have these refugees that have lost everything. And thankfully, the School of Preaching and the sponsors from the folks of India are providing some support for those folks, but we're trying to as well. So I need to make you aware of two things. One is everything's going up as it is here, but it's going up there, and now we have to, instead of going and buying at the local store, we have to ship food into the children at our expense because we can't get the food at the store anymore. So things are tougher, but God is still, protecting. So I normally, frankly, don't make a petition to people directly because if the message and the meaning and the impact and the ministry impacts you, then you're called to do something. But right now, we've got a problem. We've got a problem that the food is much more expensive. We've got to find ways to solve that. Sponsorships is one thing, other donations is another. And Holiday Park has decided to help Sangha and his family, 10 of them that are homeless, plus the 2 teachers at the Infall School of Preaching and their family, it's another 8 are homeless. And the Manasseh Church of Christ in Virginia actually helps with the Infall School of Preaching and the ministry, and they're managing all of that. But what we're doing at the Holiday Park Church is also collecting for anybody that can to help Sangha and his family be reestablished. It's just important that we distinguish between the money that is given for Angel's Place and the money that's given what we're calling the Crisis Fund because we're keeping those completely separate and managed differently. Okay? But here's the thing I wanted you to think about. Oh, by the way, this is the last time I was there. It's kind of easy to pick out the Americans. Can you pick us out? We're like a foot and a half taller than everybody else, and particularly Jan, who's 6'4". It's quite an interesting thing. But I want to go back to the scripture reading just very quickly, and thank you for indulging me to be a little bit longer than I'm sure you probably go. But I'm going to read to you from Matthew 25. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? The king will reply, truly I tell you that whatever you do for one of these, the least brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. There was a request from India that God filled in a very unusual way, and he used this congregation to do it. Thank you for that. And he used other congregations in the Pittsburgh area as well. We're very grateful for that. And we know that our help always comes from who God is, right? And so you may have a unique need this morning. There may be something in your life, something that you need addressed by this family here. Maybe that's baptism, like the 370-some children in India that have been baptized. Maybe it's some other need that you have. But as we stand and sing our invitation song, we're going to invite you to come forward. But first, thank you for listening this morning. And most of all, I petition your prayers. Your prayers for Sangha, his family, your prayers for these children. They're safe. It's a blessing of God.